In at 10, Devin. The story, The New Kid from 1:35 a.m., the third Fazbear Frights book, revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts from their class, and they aren't really popular. You know, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives, they try to make a new friend, despite Kelsey being incredibly charismatic and adored by everyone in the school. Over time, Devin grows jealous of Kelsey since, you know, he has everything that he wants. So, in an act of revenge or in an effort to gain control, Devin hatches a plan to lure him to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's and trap him in a spring-locked suit for a couple hours. To try and maybe, like, humble him, I guess. I don't know what the plan was here. But the plan, whatever it ended up being, goes incredibly wrong. After getting in the spring-locked suit, it fails, as expected, because, you know, it's a FNaF book, causing blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic, and, you know what happens when a spring lock fails. So, yeah. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime like the idiot that he is, sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth to try to find a body, and snap. The spring locks fail yet again because for some reason someone reset them, and as per usual, Devin gets his hand stuck inside the machine and bleeds out, but not before seeing black hair in the suit. Instead of blonde hair. Would you want to be spring locked? Hopefully you said no, but whatever you answered, the opposite will happen unless you like this video, okay? You got 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3. Thank you. See, there you go. Now you will either be spared or not, depending on your life choices and probably previous trauma. Let's keep going. In at 9, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game, but if I say which fan game, it will spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to the next number, okay? I'll give you a chance to do that. Alright, now that you've prepared for the spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNaF fan game created by Fiznom on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018, and it was made by the same guy who's currently working on FNaF Plus, so you know it's going to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point and click and a free-roaming horror game. So you click and it's flat. The player ends up waking up to find themselves with no memories and a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving the 5 nights. The player is given different tasks and then you have to complete them before 6 a.m. and then getting out of the establishment. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a spring-locked suit and being left to rot, meaning that you're a spring-lock victim, and I don't like that. So yeah, number 9. In at 8, Burn Trap. Well, yes, technically Burn Trap themselves isn't a spring-lock victim, it's the most recent form of our main antagonist, and you know what, I want to hate on him real quick. Like, what is this man's problem? What is with this full-on Harvey Dent knockoff and is somehow still living ass and trying to take control of Freddy, okay? Like, what does that even do for him? Sure, he can use Freddy to get to us, but this man is also just at the end of the hall, okay? He can just crawl through the vent like Monty does, and then you'd be able to get to us. Even if we, like, close the vent, we can't have it closed forever. That's why there's a power bar next to it. So why couldn't you just wait it out and then tear Gregory to shreds yourself, you pansy? Come on, stop having your minions do everything for you. Where's the William Afton that everyone was scared of, huh? Like, that little spring locking made you that much of a little bitch? Like, come on, dude. Hey, you're a grown man, and I'm the size of a 4-year-old. Why are you so scared? Because of the robot that's running on low power after glitching out? He should be on bed rest, not trying to help a kid, okay? He can't even take on multiple staff bots. Have your minions take Freddy and then deal with me yourself, okay? You say you always come back, but apparently every time you do, it's as just that little bit more of a pussy, okay? Burn Trap, more like just burn. In at 7, Fritz. Fritz is also one of the original 5 missing children, being the victim who possesses everyone's favorite animatronic, Foxy. I guess in a way it was meant to be, given that both of their names start with an F and are shorter than their other names. The others actually also have similar names to their animatronics as well. Gabriel has the same amount of letters as Fazbear, Jeremy has the same amount of letters as Bonnie, and Susie and Chica have the same amount of letters as well. That's freaking weird, man. But not much else is known about Fritz. There originally was a theory that Fritz was a good guy who wanted to help the player in FNaF 1, but that was debunked in Ultimate Custom Night during like an April Fool's update or something where Foxy's mechanics were changed to just like block one of the doors instead of kill you. Like, this was actually a joke though, since other mechanics were referencing other theories as well, like Phone Guy being Spring Trap, and like, cause Spring Trap couldn't be moving when Purple Guy was talking, as well as like Nightmare Freddy making you wake up from your nightmare, and that was referencing to Dream Theory. I mean, like, I wish I could wake up from this nightmare though. Oh wait, this is real? I talk about FNaF on the internet daily. That's actually a thing? I'm not Having a nightmare? Oh great. And at 6, Elizabeth. Elizabeth was an unintentional victim of the purple guy, given that Elizabeth was in fact his daughter. In the aftermath of his murder den closing, Afton set up shop in a new restaurant he owned called Circus Baby's Pizza World. At least one that he started opening. Where the feature animatronics were actually giant murder robots hungry for the flesh of children. Because, you know, that's what this series has come to at that point. He warned his kids to stay away from the animatronics, especially his daughter Elizabeth, since she had such a fascination with the main star baby, but she didn't listen. So in a moment of ultimate regret, she done got herself scooped, basically insta-killing her while baby's arm grabbed her, pulled her in, and then crushed her and put her in a storage unit. While he didn't kill her directly, he still killed her, and then even victimized himself since, you know, it was his daughter that got scooped, and William's also a victim because he killed his daughter. But then this leads him to discover possession at the hands of Agony, but I don't think that he knows that it's Agony, but then that completely changes his motive, so he goes on to commit more murders. It's a pivotal death in the purple guy chronology, or story. Halfway through into number 5, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Night series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3, Nightmares Awoken. Unlike the others, she's not a Reaper animatronic, which is a good thing because Jesus Christ, those things are horrifying. But Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit posters in the Night 3 cutscenes, but her faceplates are very hard to spot, and she's almost entirely purple. Purple, you know that, you know purple. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse because of course it does. She lacks a bib. She's very slim, like Toy Chica, luckily, except for the hips, which appear to be much wider because, you know, she's got to give birth to those dummy thick Chica babies. And it's also revealed that Grim Chica is a Springlock in the museum level, saying, quote, a victim of a Springlock failure forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing. I don't get it, man. Like, why? Why would you do this to Chica? I put this on the list instead of Grim Freddy because, well, I mean, like, it's Chica, okay? And look at what they did to my girl. Okay, well, look at how they massacred my girl Chica. Alright, it's rude. In at 4, Shadow animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and this comes to us after FNaF 3's phone guide dialogue that mentions multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once instead of multiple Springlock mechanisms within one suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean either multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or more than one Springlock suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the Shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these are versions of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics who do have Springlock suits, but I'm pretty sure this was disproven by Scott at some point, or at least he mentioned that it was wrong. Sorry, there are also multiple holes with the theory, but anyways, Shadow animatronics still pretty cool. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras for Domitibus, okay? The game from which he is the penultimate antagonist of. As a human, he was the man who killed the missing children and then later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burned to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire, which is where the two timelines start to separate. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNaF 3, obviously. However, it's not actually William Afton, since the game was released before the name reveal and even before FNaF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to freaking call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon spider monkey from the deepest pits of hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Like, Jesus Christ, I don't understand how this thing wants to operate, but honestly, I don't want to know, okay? This creation is a monstrosity that haunts my nightmares, and it's haunting my nightmares even more so than all my actual real world trauma combined. So I don't know, okay? Maybe Garvey's just there more because it's just like at this point my mental health has gotten to the point where he's basically a visual representation of my damage. But either way, it's terrifying. But ultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I'm pretty sure we all know this story by now. There we go. Finally, I'm kidding. Everything was going well at first, okay? They couldn't pin him down, he was on his way to immortality, but once William Afton discovered Remnant, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lures the possessed animatronics to a back room so that he can access and dismantle them, and then using their endoskeletons to melt them down and make some soul-infused metal BS. However, by doing this, he releases the souls of his his own victims, and you know, he gets reasonably scared, so he crawls inside of his spring bodysuit, trying to make himself feel more powerful, and then he gets killed. And yeah, and then he's in agony for 30 years, and that's, you know what, he deserved it. He deserved it. I mean, he doesn't die from it, but he definitely deserved to be in pain. And you know what, that makes him deserving of the number 2 slot, alright? And finally, in at number 1, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after The Silver Eyes ended with Charlie in university. However, one day, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could be either because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they just had to advance the plot. I don't know. I haven't read the original novels, and at this point I don't really want to. However, looking at the wounds, she can confirm that they are in fact from a spring lock failure, despite some not having any actual experience with forensics. But that means that we do have an unnamed springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. And if this character does have a name, please let me know in the comments, because I can't find one online. However, I also had to kind of rush to get this list, so maybe I didn't look enough. Who knows? It might have been William, it might not have been, I don't know. And there was also fake blood, and they realized that Afton faked everything so that he couldn't be caught as a serial killer. I don't know, okay? It's stupid. William needs to die. Stop bringing him back. This is like a show like Criminal Minds, bringing a serial killer back after giving him a lethal injection for the 4th time. Okay, I don't get it. Stop doing it.
And at 10, Henry. Now, there are many ways to consider Henry a victim of the purple guy, but he's first because not many of them are as direct as others. While we do see Henry get killed by a baby in FNaF World, in the main series games he lives on in FNaF 6, where he then gets burnt in a fire. Unless baby kills him in the FNaF 6 location before the fire can, since, you know, he cut her off earlier, but that's still just speculation. However, Henry was also the victim of Purple Guy's crimes when Charlotte died, as seen in FNAFs 2 and 6, as well as in the books, since Henry lost his book daughter Charlie to William when she was only 3 years old. Remember, when someone takes a life, the one who dies isn't the only victim. Their family and friends, anyone who loved them, are a victim as well. This also extends to Henry's wife, who we don't know the name of as far as I know, since she may still be alive in the games. And at 9, Gabriel. Gabriel was one of the original 5 missing children from the first ever incident that we learned about in the games. We believe his soul passed into the Freddy animatronic based on the gravestone ending and the placement of the FNAF 3 heads. Gabriel hasn't really ever gotten much of a description, aside from a brief mention in the books, but that description could also be referencing Jeremy, and it's just based on Crying Child from FNAF 4's 8-bit minigames, so there isn't really much validity to it. But I wonder how Gabriel feels about being the mascot of the company in essence, cause, you know, with over 25 versions of the character being present throughout the separate games, you're a pretty popular fellow. I originally had a theory that we played as someone named Gabriel in FNAF VR, since we ended up getting stuffed into the Freddy animatronic in the pizza party ending, but I think that Gregory from Security Breach will be a better Gabriel comparison, especially with this whole hiding in Glamrock Freddy thing. And at 8, Susie. Susie was the first to die, which is pretty horrifying when you think about it, but also kinda liberating if you think about it in another way. Horrifying because, like, you know, you get killed out of nowhere and that sucks hard. But liberating because, while yes, you're dead, you also dead, so you don't really have to worry about anything else. Well, I suppose not in this case, since they go on to possess the animatronic, but like, they don't have to worry about anything in their future, like just getting revenge on their killer. And honestly, that sounds like the life. Like, not having to pay rent and then just doing everything in your power to stop a serial killer. That sounds like my kind of vacation. But nevertheless, being the first to die is a pretty serious thing. We know she was the first thanks to Withered Chica's voice line in Ultimate Custom Night, and keep in mind that the Withered animatronics are the original ones after being decommissioned when the restaurant closed prior to FNAF 2, since FNAF 2 is still a prequel and one of the first games in the timeline, so she is Withered Chica, even if she's also Chica. Gotta love the games. And at 7, Fred Trap. Fred Trap is exactly what you'd expect. It's Springtrap on a yellow Freddy animatronic, okay? The designs are actually scarier than normal Springtrap to me, and I guess maybe it's because bears are scarier than bunnies in general. I think that Scott made William use the spring Bonnie suit because of how Scott himself was scared of Bonnie, but that's just idle speculation. I also think that originally William was planning on using the Fredbear suit, hence its superpowered jaw, but after Crying Child bit the dust, pun intended, he decided to use the Bonnie suit instead, since, you know, thanks to Elizabeth, he knew that Crying Child might be possessing Fredbear. But he wasn't, okay, and that's also idle speculation, but anyways, it's speculation from
from a DM who tells stories and knows how to story build, so maybe I'm onto something here. But anyway, there are still more rundown versions of also scrap versions of Fred Trap, which are already terrifying. And at 6, William Afton again. I say again, even though technically Burn Trap was on the list already, but also some may not consider that the same thing. But what I mean is, in the context of this number, it makes sense, okay? Could William have suffered a spring lock failure before getting trapped in the spring Bonnie suits like we see in FNaF 3? You know what? It's possible. And it explains why I said again. It certainly appears that way in the FNaF novels, because William is described as having scars that are consistent with the spring lock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? I doubt it. The reason we think it could be possible is because we hear of an incident at a sister location that has multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, so maybe that could have been William, okay? There are plenty of people that it could have been, but William having to deal with it would definitely get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But then, considering how he kept using the suit afterwards, I doubt it, because, you know, trauma, but again, he's a psychopath, so. Halfway through into number 5, Fritz. Fritz is also one of the original 5 missing children, being the victim who possesses everyone's favorite animatronic, Foxy. Well, everyone else's favorite. My favorite's still Toy Chica specifically, because that one's not possessed. I guess in a way though, it was meant to be, given that both of their names start with F and are shorter than the other names. It kind of worked out way too perfectly in that sense. The others actually have similar names to their animatronics as well. Gabriel has the same amount of letters as Fazbear. Jeremy has the same amount of letters as Bonnie. Susie and Chica have the same amount of letters too. I don't know, it's freaking weird, man. But not much else is known about Fritz, and that's why I'm saying all this jargon. It's to extend the runtime of the video. There originally was a theory that Fritz was going to be a good guy who wanted to help the player in FNaF 1, but that was debunked in Ultimate Custom Night during an April Fool's update where Foxy's mechanics were changed to instead block one of the doors. And then this was also said to be a joke by Scott, and he also added other mechanics like having Phone Guy and Springtrap connected, referencing the Phone Guy's Purple Guy theory and all that. But considering how Asher Colton Spence has been officially cast in the FNaF movie, I honestly, my first thought when I saw that kid was that he looked like a Fritz. Okay, his name is Asher, but he looks like Fritz. Orange hair for the most orange animatronic, it makes sense to me. Okay, look at this kid and tell me that he doesn't look like a Fritz. He certainly looks more like a Fritz than a Gabriel or a Jeremy, alright? Speaking of which, in it for Jeremy. As I've said in multiple videos, Jeremy is the biggest fucking troll name in FNaF history, being used for 3 separate characters, none of them being connected, and only 2 of them are actually direct victims of William Afton. Jeremy is the name of one of the original missing children, and as I said earlier, goes on to possess Bonnie. And the other Jeremy is a playtester for the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience. The one who was testing the game before Tape Girl, who ends up finding Glitch Trap and then goes insane. And by going insane, I mean genuinely ends up having a psychotic break. Jeremy ends up cutting off his own face, which is interesting given that the Withered Bonnie animatronic, as seen in FNaF 2, is also missing its face. Huh. I don't know. It's interesting because Withered Bonnie is the animatronic possessed by the missing children's incident Jeremy, and then another Jeremy ended up cutting off his face. Now, I don't think it means anything, or maybe if it was intended or just a coincidence, but knowing the series, I'm worried that the smallest detail can have the biggest consequences. Hopefully, they can explain the recurring name in the movie so that we can all just take a breather and have that load off of our backs, but I don't know. I can't look at people with the name Jeremy the same way anymore. There's a Jeremy in the office. I can't look him in the eye. Straight up. I can't look anyone in the eye, but that's the social anxiety. Getting close to the end of number 3, Casey. Casey is the main character in a Fazbear Fright story that I don't think we've talked about much in detail. I might have mentioned the story here and there, but I don't think there's ever been a whole number on it, except for one time where I've talked about roughly the same concept. Casey appears in the Fazbear Fright story Dance With Me from Step Closer, the 4th Fazbear Frights book. She ends up stealing some glasses that when worn either reveal or display a Ballora animatronic dancing. Honestly, this is the first character that I put on the list, and the reason that I really wanted this list to happen, since the entire story revolves around how she was almost a victim of Ballora. Now, don't get me wrong, the story is very unclear in this regard, but it's generally assumed that the ending does imply that the little girl who gets the glasses back got snatched by Ballora, who spent the entire story slowly getting closer to Casey every time she put on the glasses. She returns the glasses to the woman who owned them, and then when her daughter puts them on, she starts dancing. And knowing the series, I highly doubt that it's because she's excited to see a 7-foot-tall Ballora animatronic dancing right in front of her. Casey was very nearly caught by Ballora, instead having a little girl take her place, so Yeah, I hope that she shows up in the FNaF movie because, first of all, Afton absolutely built those glasses because we all know how he felt about Ballora. So it's still a victim of Purple Guy, still a William Afton victim, so calm your tits in the comments. But I don't know, I want this explained because, yeah, I've been confused about it. But ultimately, at number 2, Susie. Susie was the first to die in the missing children's incident, which is pretty horrifying when you think about it, but also kind of liberating if you think about it in another way. Horrifying because, like, you get killed out of nowhere and that sucks bad, but also liberating because while yes, you're dead, you're also dead. And you don't really have to worry about anything else, okay? I suppose not in this case, since they go on to possess the animatronics, but like, they don't have to worry about anything in their future, right? Just getting revenge, that's their only purpose. And honestly, that kind of sounds like the life. Not having to pay rent, and just doing everything in your power to stop a serial killer, that's like my kind of vacation. But I digress. Being the first to die is a pretty serious thing. We know that she was the first thanks to Withered Chica's voice line in Ultimate Custom Night. Keep in mind that the Withered animatronics are the original ones, after being decommissioned when the restaurant closes prior to FNaF 2, since FNaF 2 is still a prequel and the first games in the it's a whole lot. But the Withered animatronics are the ones we see in FNaF 1. And considering how the chairs and like the clapper boards seen in the BTS photos say Bad Cupcake, Susie is a very likely appearance in the movie, possibly even a focal point. So yeah, maybe this is a love story between Mike and Toy Chica, so I can vicariously live through him. And finally, in number 1, Crying Child. Okay, now this one is certainly going to be a bit controversial. There's going to be people mad at me in the comments, but there is no way that I could have done this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates of my DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram on a regular basis about the bite of 83 and how it wasn't William's fault bothers me to my core. They also keep saying that it's the bite of 87. It's not. Okay, they're two different things. I say this every time I bring it up though, the bite of 83 is not a springlock failure. It could not have been. The reason I know it wasn't a springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning no springlocks could have had a chance of failing, since a springlock failure refers to when the mechanisms are being forced to stay open, and then the failure is when they close on you when you're inside the suit, okay? Plus, there's no springlock mechanisms in the jaw, and it wouldn't need it anyway, because like the jaw just moves up and down. I don't know what else to say. It would have had to be super powered in order to actually crush a skull, something that only William would be able to integrate, considering how he made the robots and is the suit technician. Alright, it's fairly cut and dry at this point. I don't know why people are still yelling at me in my DMs, but it's happening. I don't know, it could have been that he planned on using the Fredbear suit first as like his murder suit, and then his son got killed in it, and then he was like, yeah, maybe not, but who knows. And at 10, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that animatronic jaw should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kind of gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly? Holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life, and I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And at 9, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after the Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have
have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This spring lock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And it ain't the new kid. Continuing with the theme of FNAF books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, because you know that's kind of serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a spring-locked suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the spring locks fail, as expected, because you know this is a FNAF book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The spring locks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No.
And it's 7 Elizabeth. Elizabeth was an unintentional victim of Purple Guy, given that Elizabeth was in fact his daughter. Yeah. In the aftermath of his murder den closing, Afton sets up shop in a new restaurant he owned and operated called Circus Baby's Pizza World, where the feature animatronics were actually giant murder bots hungry for the flesh of children, because you know, that's what the series has come to. Or at least that's what it had come to, and then it got worse. He warned his kids to stay away from the animatronics, especially his daughter Elizabeth, since she had such a fascination with the main star baby, but she didn't listen, because of course she didn't. She's a goddamn kid, and you made the animatronic specifically to attract kids. So, in a moment of ultimate regret, she ends up getting scooped and insta-killed while baby's arm grabbed her, pulled her in, and then like crushed her in her storage unit. Yeah, it was pretty brutal. And while he didn't kill her directly, he still killed her, okay? And then he even victimized himself, since, you know, it was his daughter that got scooped, and the friends and family of the victim are also victims. This then leads him to discover his passion, but then this leads him to discover possession and agony and like the remnant metal thing. So yeah, I don't know how he knows that it was agony that did the possessing, but this then completely changes his motive. So it's a pivotal death in the Purple Guy chronology, so hopefully it'll be in the movie. And it's 6, Gabriel. Gabriel was one of the original 5 missing children from the first ever incident that we learn about in the games. We believe his soul is passed into the Freddy animatronic based on the gravestone ending and the placement of the FNAF 3 heads. Gabriel, though, hasn't really ever gotten much of a description, aside from a brief mention in the books. But that description could also be referencing Jeremy, and based on Crying Child from FNAF 4's 8-bit minigames, it could also be him. So there's not really much validity to it, but I mean, I don't know, he could still show up. I wonder how Gabriel feels about being the mascot of the company, in essence, which is kind of weird. Like, he's not getting paid for it. And with over 25 versions of the character being present throughout all of the games, I originally had a theory that we played as someone named Gabriel in FNAF VR, since we ended up getting stuffed into a Freddy animatronic at the end of the game. But yeah, then I thought that Gregory from Security Breach was going to be a Gabriel comparison, because like, you know, whole hiding in Freddy thing, Gabriel's in Freddy, but then he turned into Crying Child. So who knows? I don't know. Maybe that's who Grant Freely is playing, since it's a supporting character in the movie. Maybe that, I don't know. I threw in at number 5, Vanny. Vanny is kind of a different victim in the sense that she isn't dead, but she has been controlled by Afton in the form of a mind virus that is just pretty damn ridiculous even for the FNAF series. But presumably getting caught by testing the FNAF VR game, or maybe through FNAF AR, she gets partially controlled by William. Hence the potential double personality that we see as hinted at through the FNAF AR emails. But this
could also just be Tape Girl that we hear in FNAF VR, who's the one who gives you false information about how to beat Glitch Trap. Vanny, we know, is a victim of the purple guy since, well, he's been the only killer in the series up until this point, and she wears a fabric bunny suit, alluding to the fact that William had his spring bunny suit that turned him into Springtrap and, you know, the whole Glitch Trap thing. Gotta love them parallels. This is how serial killers are caught, though. Like, change your MO every once in a while. They only catch the stupid criminals, so don't be stupid. I mean, don't be a criminal. Especially, just don't do it. And at 4, Jeremy's. As I said in the Souls Trapped in Animatronics video, Jeremy is one of the biggest troll names in FNAF history, being used for 3 separate characters, which, I mean, doesn't sound like a lot, but for FNAF it is. However, only 2 of them are the direct victims of Purple Guy. Jeremy is the name of one of the original missing children, and as I said earlier, he goes on to possess Bonnie. The other Jeremy is a playtester for the Freddy Fazbear Virtual Experience, the game we tested in FNAF VR, the one who tested it before Tape Girl, who ends up finding the Glitch Trap anomaly and causes him to go mad. And by going mad, I genuinely mean, like, absolutely psycho. Jeremy ends up cutting off his own face. But I mean, like, that's also interesting because, like, Withered Bonnie, the Withered Bonnie animatronic that we see in FNAF 2 is missing his face. And it's weird because Withered Bonnie is the Bonnie that's possessed by the missing children's incident Jeremy. Now, like, I don't know if that means anything or if it's intended or if it's just coincidence, but knowing this series, I'm always worried that, like, the smallest detail is gonna have the biggest consequence. And at 3, Cassidy. Cassidy is probably who you'd expect to be number 1 on this list. You know, the generally assumed, the one you should not have killed. The missing children's victim who went on to possess Golden Freddy. Cassidy is described in the novels as a young girl with long black hair, which is also the description of the only human to appear in the FNAF Survival Logbook, or Security Logbook, I call it both. The name Cassidy was also discovered in that book, when a Reddit theorist going by the username DPowerful1 took wrong or highlighted numbers from various pages and put those into word search and in coordinates, and then he ended up finding the name Cassidy, which has got to be the most complicated thing in history. Like, we dig through source code and we put audio files through goddamn spectrograms to try to find clues, but even this was too much for this series. Like, I don't know why I had to go and make things so complicated. Penultimately, in at number 2, Charlotte. Charlotte is one of the most troublesome victims Purple Guy has had. Being the 6th victim, Charlotte gets killed outside the pizzeria, despite desperate attempts from her father, Henry, to prevent this, mainly by creating a security animatronic designed like a puppet to protect other kids but treat her as a priority. You know, he's a parent, I get it. However, when it gets trapped in its box, it's unable to make it out to Charlotte in time to save her. So, in another attempt, the puppet saves her in another way, allowing her agony to reach out and take hold of the animatronic. As the puppet, Charlotte then goes on to share her gift of the second chance with the other animatronics, bringing them to life as well, resulting in William's ultimate undoing. In a way, Charlotte is really the one you should not have killed, since if he had spared her, maybe he wouldn't have lost his life in the end, or been spring-locked. So, yeah, shouldn't have done it. Finally, in at number 1, us. Now, this is why Cassidy isn't number 1. No matter what, we are a victim of the Purple Guy, and not in any philosophical way either. We are a direct victim of the Purple Guy, or William Afton, or Glitch Trap, or whatever you want to call him. Since, thanks to FNAF VR, no matter what you do, you end up losing at the end of the game. You either merge with him and join him on stage, or you complete the ritual only to get locked away in your own mind as William walks free in your body, or, the easier one, we get stuffed into Freddy at the end of the pizza party minigame. But if you end up collecting all 16 tapes and actually fully complete the game, you're a victim of the Purple Guy. Like, he uses your body to commit whatever comes next. I mean, we could be Vanny, we could be Tape Girl giving it another shot, we could be some random bystander, but either way, we the player get gotten by this toxic, poisonous grip that is the Purple Guy. So, yeah, I'm gonna put myself at number 1. And at 10, Henry. Now, there are many ways to consider Henry a victim of Purple Guy, but he's first on the list because not many of them are, like, as direct as the others on this list. Like, while we do see Henry killed by Baby in FNaF World, in the main series games he lives on to FNAF 6 where he burns in a fire, supposedly by his own hand. Unless Baby kills him before the fire, since he, like, cut her off when she was trying to do her whole thing, but that's just speculation. However, Henry was also the victim of Purple Guy's crimes when Charlotte died, as seen in FNAF 2 and FNAF 6, as well as in the books, since Henry lost his daughter Charlie to William when she was only 3 years old. Remember, when someone takes a life, the one who dies isn't the only victim, alright? Their friends, their family, anyone who loved the victim are victims as well.
okay? So this also extends to Henry's wife, who we don't know the name of as far as I know, since she may not even be alive in the games. So she could also definitely be alive in the movie, especially if William and Henry are. So we might even see both. That's a 2-for-1 deal on number 10. You're welcome. And at 9, Charlotte. Charlotte is one of the most troublesome victims that purple guy had. Being the first victim, Charlotte gets killed outside Fredbear's family diner, despite desperate attempts from her father, Henry, to prevent this, mainly by creating a security animatronic designed to be a puppet to protect other kids, but treat her as a priority. Remember the green bracelet thing? However, when it gets trapped in a box, it's unable to make it out to Charlotte in time to save her. So, in another attempt, the puppet saves her in a different way, allowing her agony to reach out and take hold of the animatronic. As the puppet, Charlotte then went on to share her gift of a second chance with the other animatronics, bringing them to life as well, resulting in William's ultimate undoing. So, in a way, Charlotte really is the one you should not have killed, but just like in like a name sense, not in like a character sense. Since if he had spared her, maybe none of the other animatronics would have been alive and he wouldn't have gotten killed or spring-locked or whatever. And also, if you want to stay up to date on the FNaF movie news, be sure you hit subscribe, because as soon as we actually find out something concrete, and that wouldn't be like a 30-second video, you'll know. And at 8, Cassidy. Cassidy is probably who you expected to be number 1 on this list. The generally assumed one you should not have killed, the missing children's victim who went on to possess Golden Freddy, at least if you believe Golden Freddy to be an actual animatronic and not a hallucination. Cassidy is described in the novels as a young girl with long black hair, which also is the description of the only human to appear as a picture in the FNaF survival logbook, or security logbook, depending on if you read the crossed out name or not. I call it both. The name Cassidy was also discovered in this book when a theorist going by username DPowerful1 took wrong or highlighted numbers from various pages and put them into the word search as coordinates, in essence, which has got to be the most complicated name drop in history, okay? Like, we dig through source code, we put like audio files through spectrograms, we put them on reverse and speed them up and trying to find clues, but this was even too much for this series, okay? Like, I don't know why you had to go make things so complicated, but timely pop culture references aside, I don't know if Cassidy's going to be in the movie, given how the screenplay is the Mike screenplay, at least going off what Scott said on Reddit years ago. But in that post, he also said that he scrapped the Cassidy screenplay, so I doubt she'll be a major player, but she could still show up. And at 7, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists from Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on Night 5 and found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal Golden Fredbear suit, only with his suit glowing a deep purple while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there's nothing really inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. The animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which was later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that William was the only victim of a Springlock failure. And in the museum level, which unlocks after Night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear. And at 6, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot and she's almost entirely purple. She really resembles Toy Chica. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and her overall body is very slim like the original Toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider. Got the baby birth and hips. I regret that immediately. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, a victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she is wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale. Why is that so relatable to me? Like, no matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty. Not the whole being manipulated by your sister and mother thing. That's weird. But like, I'm okay with forever being pasty. However, I did rank this above Grim Foxy because, like, it's Chica. And look what they did to my girl Chica. I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky, for the transgressions. Halfway through in at number 5, William Afton. William does eventually kick the bucket, but even when his physical form dies, he comes back as sentient code in a video game, and isn't that the dream? Either way, this man narrowly avoids dying throughout the whole series. This man was possessed by a spirit that intentionally kept him alive through multiple instances that should have killed him, so I think if anything, this guy is the definition of almost victim. William doesn't even ultimately die until he allows himself to in the Fazbear warehouse in the man in room 1280, and even when his body explodes, he's still surviving through latching onto a hard drive that gets scanned into Help Wanted, and I have no doubts that he picked the one that would specifically be used or one that he instructed someone else to use when making the VR game. At least if the game was planned before his demise. Seriously though, William survived a spring locking, the FNaF 3 fire, the FNaF 6 fire, and the constant assassination attempts from the hospital staff, so this guy is for sure making it onto this list. And at 4, Kelsey. Kelsey, in essence, is the main antagonist to the Fazbear Frights story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book, 1:35 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist, Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least, so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows it's someone else because the hair color's different. And then Devin gets stuck in the suit by his arm and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story, because while Kelsey did get springlocked, he ends up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey's a ghost, some think that he's the one you should not have killed, others don't know. But either way, this version of Kelsey, the one who got into the suit, was nearly a victim that somehow survived or escaped. At least, so we think. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, us. We as the player in many of these games narrowly avoid death. Sometimes with ease, sometimes by the skin of our teeth, like in the Baby Night Terror level of FNaF VR, where we are literally trapped in a closet that Baby could open at any time and kill us. Other times are less close, like if we see an animatronic right outside our window in FNaF 1 and need to quickly close the door before it gets us. But either way, there is no denying that we in every FNaF game are almost victims. Sometimes we even are victims, like in FNaF 4 where we die thanks to William pulling the plug, or in Sister Location where he gets scooped and stuffed with Ennard, or FNaF 6 where we willingly allow ourselves to be freed by the cleansing fire. No matter what, it's undeniable that we are some of the most resilient characters in the whole series. Normal people would see what they're up against and then quit day 1. And then when asked about it at their next interview, they would say haunted animatronics were trying to kill me, so I quit. Simple as that, no other explanation needed. But we, as the players, stick it out for a week. And instead of quitting, we get fired, because we know what we need to do, and that's pretty admirable. Penultimately, in at number 2, Jeremy Fitzgerald. Jeremy Fitzgerald is the character most assumed suffered the bite of 87, a moment that has been debated since the start of the Five Nights series. While yes, this Jeremy may lose his frontal lobe, he could have lost his life. And I don't know about you, but losing my frontal lobe and getting promoted to day shift and suing that company to get a boatload of money sounds a lot better than death to me. Especially since MatPack concluded that one of the only things that would happen would be your loss of self-preservation and fear. Now I have no idea what an entire frontal lobe being removed would do, but it still sounds better than death. Which in my opinion makes this character almost a victim, since if that animatronic had moved even slightly, or Jeremy had been an inch closer, it would have been much worse than it was. Oh yeah. Finally, in at number 1, Casey. Casey's the main character in a Fazbear Fright story I don't know if I've really talked about in detail. I might have mentioned the story here and there, but I don't think there's been a whole number on it. Casey appears in the Fazbear Fright story Dance With Me from Step Closer, the 4th Fazbear Frights book. She ends up stealing some glasses that when worn either reveal or display a Ballora animatronic dancing. Honestly, this is the first character I put on this list and the reason I thought this list was possible, since this entire story revolves around how she was almost a victim of Ballora. Now don't get me wrong, the story is very unclear in this regard, but it's generally assumed that the ending does imply that the little girl who gets the glasses back got snatched by Ballora, who spent the entire story slowly getting closer to Cassie every time she put on those glasses. She returns the glasses to the woman who owns them, and when her daughter ends up putting them on, she's the one who starts dancing. And knowing this series, I highly doubt it's because she was excited to see a 7-foot-tall Ballora dancing right in front of her. Cassie was very nearly caught by Ballora, instead having a little girl take her place. That kid was probably a brat anyway though. I hope it was brave.
And at 10, Henry. While Henry does ultimately perish thanks to the FNAF 6 fire, he would have been a target for William beforehand, especially once he had learned who was actually committing the crimes at his restaurants. But why didn't William go after him? It would have been too obvious, really. I mean, there are 5 murders that occur inside the walls of the restaurant. They already suspect William for it, but then Henry goes missing and then William is left as the sole proprietor of the business. That's super suspicious and would definitely result in an arrest. Motive means an opportunity. Motive is absolutely there, especially if William was cheating with Henry's wife or something. Means would be fairly easy to find, and William has plenty of opportunities, let's be honest. So killing Henry would only result in William going to jail, which probably saved Henry's life. And at 9, Vanny. Vanny is an interesting case here, because while she is in a way a victim of Glitch Trap, she doesn't really know it, or at least is unable to communicate it, only being able to search help on the company computer. Not only that, but William could very well have killed Vanny, but he didn't, opting instead to gain partial control over her. So while she isn't a victim in the traditional sense, I'm sure that there are people who are willing to argue in the comments. So I'm going to make this simple. My list, my rules. Plus, this is a really hard list. There aren't many people who don't end up dying in the FNAF universe, alright? So cut me some slack if a couple of these numbers are iffy to say the least. But Vanny has not yet suffered the ultimate fate of the forever naps, so I'm allowing myself to say that she was almost a victim. Does that mean she isn't going to die? No, I feel like she almost certainly will perish, but she hasn't yet, and that's good enough for me. And at 8, Sammy Emily. Another one that kinda fits if you squint at it and then cough a couple of times. Sammy Emily was in the first 2 FNAF novels Charlie's twin brother who was kidnapped and killed by William Afton. We as the reader and Charlie believe this to be the case for the silver eyes as well as the twisted ones. However, in the 4th Closet, the 3rd and final book in the novel trilogy, we learn that there is no Sammy Emily, that instead Charlie was the one who was kidnapped and killed by Afton, and that for all these years every version of Charlie had been a robot designed by Henry and implanted with fake memories. So technically, since Sammy Emily isn't real, they aren't a victim. And if we want to get even more meta with it, they were almost a victim because Scott could have decided to let the story stay that way and not make Charlie a robot. But he didn't. Sure, Sammy could have been a real character. That, or if Sammy was real, they would have been a victim, meaning that since it didn't happen, they were almost a victim. Like I said, this list was hard, but I promise the next ones make more sense. And at 7, Michael Afton. This relies on heavy speculation and assumption. However, if the entered enema is truly what killed Michael's body, then could it be considered a spring locking? We don't really know if the Funtime animatronics have spring locks, but we can assume that they do thanks to their moving parts and abilities like a giant claw that goes out and stores items. But this would also mean that Ennard would have at least some of those same parts. So if the Funtime animatronics that were made around the same time as the original spring lock animatronics used similar parts or techniques, which is likely, that means that Michael Afton would also be a spring lock victim. We don't need solid proof since this is a possible spring locking victims list, so proof of possibility is all I really need. And honestly, I think that this would provide a good explanation as to why he turned purple. Since people who die don't turn purple. Instead, if they rot, they would most likely be depicted as green, especially when another major character is linked to the color purple. So, if that is indeed bruising, it would make sense if the spring lock mechanisms were hurting him from the inside out. And at 6, Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that actually was a victim of a spring lock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no harmful tendencies before this, so a spring lock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a spring lock failure, assumingly, would definitely provide enough power to do that, since the spring locks themselves would snap with such ferocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to do that thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics were suspended, because now one of their employees was bit and they had to promote him and fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So overall, whoever the Bite of 87 victim is could definitely have been a spring lock victim. Halfway through it at number 5, William Afton. William is at number 5 because, well, he absolutely did deserve to be a spring lock victim, but he also actually was, and seemingly is the only one who actually was on this list. But like, for real, this man deserved what he got in more ways than one. Seriously. He was a mass murderer who would have gotten a lethal injection anyway, but also the technician that made the suits, the man that handles the suit maintenance on the daily, and is absolutely explained to every single employee that has put one of these fuckers on the proper procedure for the spring lock suits.
mostly for tax and liability reasons, probably, okay? But including the spring Bonnie suit that he uses to kill people, okay? Then he gets inside one without thinking and somehow doesn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling causing the spring locks that were active at this moment to fail and just fill him full of metal, okay? But like, it's your building, my guy. How are you not painfully aware of the leaking ceiling in this back room? Really? Like, how? How do you not know? Seriously, somehow, this lucky motherfucker managed to get possessed by someone that he killed who was so pissed at him that they kept him alive for all of his other supposed to be deaths. Because they wanted William to suffer. Like, god damn it. No matter who it is, whether you believe it was Crying Child or Cassidy, despite there being a more logical conclusion when you don't just blindly listen to MatPat, like, why? Why couldn't you just let him die? I get that you want him to suffer, okay, obviously. I mean, I put him on this list. I wanted him to be spring locked. But like, doing that results in him killing more people. So why? Why would you do that? And for Vanessa. I feel like this one is kind of obvious, and you may get mad at me for saying this, but Vanessa deserves to be spring locked, man, okay? You're probably thinking, but she's possessed, you moron. She doesn't have control over her actions. But that's the thing. She does. Vanessa has no willpower to sacrifice herself for the greater good, okay? At this point, I think that it's safe to infer that Jeremy from FNaF VR didn't go crazy because he just saw a glitch trap. It's fairly reasonable to say that he got possessed. Tape Girl hadn't broken glitch trap into the tapes yet, and he was probably just able to possess whoever he wanted. So if Jeremy did get possessed, and the possession worked in a similar way that it does with Vanessa, which would make sense, Jeremy would at times be sentient and in control of his own body. So if he knew about glitch trap, maybe he didn't cut his face off because he was freaking out like he had just taken like the Epsom salt because you use it in the bath. Maybe he did it to try and kill the monster that was inside of him, okay? So if Vanessa had the gall, Afton wouldn't really have a vessel, okay? Especially since the VR game at this point was probably abandoned. But she won't. But she won't do it. So she deserves to be spring locked. Getting close to the end into number 3, Gregory. The way I see it, Gregory is such a stuck-up little shit that he would absolutely deserve to be crushed by metal robotic bits being put in the same place as his bones. Because this kid is just a damn menace that seemingly doesn't want to take responsibility for any of his actions. And you know what? None of you hold him accountable either. Gregory orders the robots to disassemble Vanny. Quote, okay? Gregory being willing to kill Vanny is already pretty messed up, but while some would argue self-defense, this is not self-defense. Self-defense requires a reasonable amount of force to be used, okay? Tearing a person limb from limb is not reasonable force. This kid is easily able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation and then use their upgrades on Freddy. He is willing to kill Vanny, like I said, despite actually seemingly knowing her like we see in the best ending. And then he burns Burn Trap multiple times in an attempt to stop him from taking control over Freddy. But again, he's also just setting fire to this thing all the time. So like, what the absolute living hell is this kid doing? And how is he so nonchalant about this whole thing? Okay, this guy literally kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to a destroyed Freddy robot that they can remake. Dude, Vanny's literally bleeding out right next to you. I'm sure that her ribs are just splayed across the floor. Dude, couldn't you have just said like stop Vanny or restrain Vanny? Stop Vanny would have been the easiest one, not freaking disassemble. Okay, you're not panicking about literally anything else in this game. Okay, just say something that doesn't involve a human dying for God's sakes, okay? Stop Vanny! Like, dude! Penultimately, in number 2, Henry. Yes, I'm going to continue the Henry hate train. Choo choo, get on board, motherfuckers. Because despite how many people try and defend him, I will never stand down. I don't get what Henry's deal is, because he does not kill William at any point in the series, aside from trying to make it look like a fire did it. But William is already considered dead. How would you killing him make things suspicious? So why would you try to cover it up with a fire? For some reason, okay, he seems to be fine offing William's son when he gets the chance though. I mean, in both of the fires that Henry has set that we see, FNaF 3 and FNaF 6, Michael was there both times. And he didn't seem to care that Michael was in the building either time, okay? He doesn't even give Michael the opportunity to leave in FNaF 6 despite there having been a way out planned. Quote from Henry's final speech. "And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that that's not not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. You have a feeling? What are you, the black eye frickin' peas? He assumes that we also want to die in these halls, but doesn't give us the chance to actually make that decision for ourselves. He just forces us to die, since he doesn't give us a way out. Okay? That's murder! Whether we wanted it or not. Okay, assisted suicide is still illegal in the majority of states, I'm pretty sure, okay? But even then, not giving us the choice, even just assuming that we want it, makes it a murder. Instead of like having the fire burn the building down, or having baby lob his head off, okay? He should have had to suffer a spring lock failure just so that he could see how easy it would have been just to off Afton directly instead of trying to do it like a coward. And finally, in at number 1, Michael Afton. Michael Afton absolutely, in my mind, deserves to have gotten spring locked instead of simply burning in FNaF 6, okay? Like, sure, he seems to be playing the good guy, going after his father, but in reality, Michael, to me, he's just playing the hero this whole time and not actually doing anything. He says he's trying to right his father's wrongs and whatnot, but even Oliver Queen did more than that, okay? He's not doing it because he's a good person, he's doing it because he feels bad and not because of, like, some higher moral code. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which I mean is understandable, but then that subsequently means that anything he does to try and like fix the things that his father did is just to make himself feel better about his own mistakes. Because in the end, nothing is gonna bring his little bro back, okay? And he doesn't even really have the stomach to actually stop his father once and for all. He says that he's going to come find him, but then when he does in FNaF 6, he doesn't burn down the place to stop him, okay? Henry does that. Henry is the only one who's actually willing to sack up and try to stop William, even if he does it in a cowardly way, okay? That just shows how not serious Michael is. And if he really wanted to make sure that William was dead, he wouldn't have let himself burn in the FNaF 6 fire, okay? But he does. He lets himself burn, or at least doesn't actually successfully get out of the building, so that he won't have to feel the regret of hurting his brother anymore, okay? Because he has the curse of knowledge, since he knows what his father was doing, and he doesn't want to deal with it anymore. And you know what? That deserves a spring locking. That's right. I don't care how mad at you are at me in the comments, okay? I don't care. It's true, alright? It's Monday morning, I'm mad.
And at 10, William Afton. Again, could William have suffered a spring lock failure before getting trapped in the spring bodysuit like we see in FNaF 3? It's possible, and it certainly appears like that's the case in the FNaF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with the spring lock failure before becoming springtrapped in the novels. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the spring lock suits were retired? Since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location, so is that unfortunate incident William? There are plenty of people it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time. But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on when the room was wet like we see in FNaF 3's cutscene, it suggests that that's probably unlikely, but it's still possible. So since this list is possible springlock victims, I think he deserves to be on this list, at least at number 10, since can we really talk about springlock victims without mentioning good old Willie Afton? Exactly. And at 9, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNaF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNaF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before Silver Eyes starts, and then he dies in FNaF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve the springlock failure, or something having to do with springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, or maybe Baby has some springlock mechanisms inside her when she killed Henry. Hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, well, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately, but it's still true. Henry dying doesn't really mean much to the overall FNaF lore, and we didn't even know he was alive until FNaF 6, so maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way, rather than just, you know, burning alive, because that sucks. Maybe he wanted to prevent himself from even more severe agony so that he didn't possess something. And at 8, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all. We hear him die in FNaF 1 on night 4 with the sound of multiple animatronics banging on his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories though is that animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a very painful death, especially since at this point the spring-locked suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of the events of the spring-locked suits is a little messy since we don't really have years for things like them getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one or maybe used it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just didn't want us to know that yet or something. I still feel like that might have been in the realm of possibility. Maybe not now, but it was. And at 7, Lewis. Lewis was introduced in FNAF AR through emails that he's lucky he's the only one seeing, and not HR. Lewis is a creepy coworker of Ness who works at IT, at the company creating all the robots for the Fazbear Entertainment delivery service that we experience in Special Delivery. And he's probably the creepiest damn character in the entire series. Honestly, I'm surprised he hasn't been killed, especially if Ness is indeed Vanessa and Vanny, since he seems to be on to their little scheme. He's intercepted search queries and emails that just make Ness seem off, and straight up like a serial killer. Didn't she order like realistic human masks at some point? Anyway, if William had seen these emails addressed to Ness, he would feel required to take matters into his own hands and get rid of the guy who keeps spying on them. Unless this would be a similar situation to Henry, where the cops would look at these emails and see that he was harassing Ness and then maybe take her in for questioning. I mean, it's a realistic scenario. Ness feels threatened or annoyed by Lewis and then just gets rid of him. People have killed for less, and the contents of those emails is only more incriminating. Like, who orders realistic human faces? Aside from me. And at 6, Indie Game Dev. The Scott Cawthon in-universe stand-in is an interesting character I hope they explore more in the future. But with Scott retiring, could this character meet a grisly fate? It could be that Fazbear Entertainment wants to tie up loose ends while trying to rebuild their reputation, or that maybe they threatened him into making the games in the first place, so they're keeping a close watch on him. I mean, if William learns about what this guy was making, maybe he would feel like he needs to silence the one man who knows too much, or strong-arm him into creating the games after he learned that he knew about the real story behind Fazbear Entertainment. It's entirely possible. It could also be that the indie game dev was the person the FNAF 6 franchise owner job was for, since there was a way out plan for them, and Henry knew at least one other person that knew what was going on. But that person wasn't Michael, as we learned from the final speech, meaning that whoever that was almost a victim as well.
And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you.
Halfway through into number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying. And at 4, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, he is now a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has guts coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets. He's even missing exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least it's flesh-colored, it may be even fully a flesh phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or blood strands connecting to the side of his head. It's horrifying, dude. This is a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 when he got springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So unfortunate, man. He was supposed to be the next best Fortnite player. That's a joke for the long-term subs. You know it. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear.
Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a spring-locked suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. And my real second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least one finger on his right hand, and it's absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dromitibus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dromitibus animatronics list? Penultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now. Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal. So in an effort to study it further, William lures possessed animatronics to the back room that they can't access and uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims he claimed oh so long ago. Shocked, he tries to scare them by getting into his spring Bonnie suit, which also coincidentally makes him feel more powerful. However, this haste coupled with the leaking in the back room causes the spring locks to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. As we learn in the Man in Room 1280, he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he was living that agonizing pain for 30 years. And that makes him damn well deserving of the number 2 spot. And before you ask, no, him and Garvey are 2 separate characters, meaning that they can both be included on this list. You're welcome. Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNaF fan game created by FizzNom on GameJolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNaF Plus for the Fazbear Fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and is tasked with surviving 5 nights in escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a spring-lock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a spring-lock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get spring-locked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks, and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that. In at 10, Elizabeth Afton. Elizabeth is at the top of this list because, well, she got killed, but she also doesn't really seem to deserve it until after she gets killed, and then she deserves the spring locking. Which, I mean, in a way makes sense, and it's something that I've been using as evidence when it comes to who I think the vengeful spirit is. Because, you know, spirits, when they're, you know, being spirits for longer periods of time, would understandably start to go crazy, or even crazier, and this is an idea that Supernatural, the show, has used in length. And the same idea, though, could be applying to Elizabeth and Crying Child. Just because you start off good or loving your father doesn't mean that you'll continue to see things that way in a few years' time. And Elizabeth, while not deserving a spring locking in 1983 when she dies, definitely deserves one come sister location in FNaF 6. I mean, she literally betrays her brother and sister location, nearly killing him, and then, again, she also betrayed him, and then in FNaF 6, she wants to make her father proud. Her murderous, psychopathic father. She wants to make him proud. Considering how you've been possessing an animatronic that he made that caused you to die,
that he made, I think that you would have already made him pretty proud, I guess. It's a damn shame that you turned into this, but whatever. In at 9, Mr. Hippo. Okay, this is kind of a joke number, but also not, because Mr. Hippo is literally the worst thing ever in Ultimate Custom Night. Mr. Hippo is a viable animatronic from FNaF 6 that returns as an antagonist in Ultimate Custom Night. Okay, Mr. Hippo will climb through the duct systems trying to reach one of the 2 hoses in the office. Hoses? Is that right? I don't know. I just copied and pasted that line from the wiki. The player needs to use an audio lure to keep him in place and to move him around so that they can use the heater to push him back, and he is fooled 100% of the time by the audio lure. Also is fooled faster than Helpy Frog. However, most of the scare factor from this animatronic doesn't come from their behavior or their design. This time around, rather, their death lines. Cause you see, Mr. Hippo has a knack for going on about things. A lot. Okay, it's like me on a first date. Still, he will go into like 5-minute long speeches that you have to deal with every time he kills you. Meaning that if you get jump scared, you're boned for enough time to make a sandwich, okay? Which is annoying as hell. Getting killed by him enough will eventually and cause you to end up agreeing with me that he needs to be spring locked. Because you end up knowing what comes after the smoke of the jump scare clears, and it's just pain. In at 8, Roxy. Okay, I know that Roxy and Mr. Hippo are animatronics and incapable of actually feeling pain because of a spring locking, but honestly, I also just hate this kind of person. The self-centered tool bag who only cares about themselves, whether they secretly hate themselves or not, that's not what matters here, okay? Who you are and what kind of person you are is defined by how you treat others and who you are when the pressure is on. And Roxy is just horrible. And while they may not be able to feel pain from the spring locking, at least Roxy will be contained if they got spring locked, okay? And honestly, that's what I need. I don't want to deal with this personality type. I've dealt with enough people like this throughout my life, and I'm still only 22 goddamn years old, which means that I'm really fed up with this shit. So yeah, there's not much else to say with this one other than I want her to be restrained so that I don't have to deal with her. So yeah, that's it. That's the number. What are you still doing here? Go to the next one. And it's 7, Cassidy. Some say that Cassidy was spring locked, but honestly, there isn't really much evidence for that. But you know what? If she wasn't, she damn well deserves to be. And why, you ask? How could a little girl who got killed and then go on to possess the killer so he could suffer for all eternity deserve such a fate as a spring locking? Well, exactly for the reason you listed. Because everyone thinks that Cassidy is the vengeful spirit, aka the one you should not have killed, aka the one who possesses Afton to make him suffer. But when you look at it, logically, taking into consideration more than just what Matt Patton says, it would make more sense for Crying Child to be the vengeful spirit. But nobody wants to listen to me. Nobody wants to hear even my suggestions because of Cassidy. The amount of hate that I have gotten in the comments, in my DMs, on TikTok for God's sakes, is more than I have gotten for anything else. Even more than I got for suggesting that Michael was a Crying Child robot. Just because William didn't kill Crying Child directly does not mean that he couldn't possibly blame the man who made the robot and gave it enough power to crush a skull for his death. Because, you know, that wouldn't normally be required. Plus, Cassidy only has significance because you think she's the vengeful spirit. Take that away, and what importance does she have? Exactly. So, just for that, and for hardly anyone being willing to even hear me out, Cassidy damn well deserves it. Honestly, she could be higher on the list, but I wanted to rant about other people a little bit more. So yeah, there you go. And at 6, FNaF cops. The cops in the FNaF universe are absolutely the most moronic bunch of people I have ever, I guess, not seen, but heard of, honestly. Like, yeah, I get that they couldn't catch William for story purposes, but that seemingly was retconned, since in the first game they said that they had made an arrest. They could have ended it right there. The story could have been over, but they couldn't find the bodies, so they let him go. Yeah, ignore the animatronics that smell like death, are leaking blood and other bodily fluids, and that many parents have compared to reanimated corpses. Those don't have anything to do with this scenario. Yeah, totally. And even when they find baby's blueprints and see that she has a child storage tank, they don't do anything more than question him. Quote, "There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those." Dude, arrest him!
and search the bloody, rotten body smelling animatronics. God damn it, how hard is this? Okay, if it's a crime scene or a suspected crime scene, come on, if it's a crime scene, you don't need to have a warrant, for fuck's sakes, okay? They all deserve spring lockings for the sheer stupidity alone. I'm surprised that they didn't crawl into one and then get killed by it just because they're that damn stupid. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow Animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This comes to us after the FNaF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms that hold back all the robotic parts in the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside the suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the Shadow Animatronics came from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. And while there are holes in this theory, there is potential that this is the case. So the Shadow Animatronics are possible Springlock victims. I'm gonna have to keep saying that because people in the comments are gonna get mad. It's like, oh, they weren't Springlock. They could have been. It's possible. And that's the list, okay? And at 4, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only really being discovered recently, and honestly we don't know too much about her. We don't know how she died, so the potential is there for her to be a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way. After all, she does possess Golden Freddy, who we figured was a Springlock suit, that ended up having the guts removed, hence the slumped overness. However, if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, they would have found it when they were gutting him. But maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. And I mean, like, to be fair, for a suit technician, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics that he literally designed, since, you know, he got snapped when the suit was wet. Either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim would help explain a lot in the series. Just, you know, the hallucinations and whatnot. Getting close to the end into number 3, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book 135 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least, so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, for some reason, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color's different, and then Devin gets stuck and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story because while Kelsey did get Springlocked, he ended up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, while some think that he's the one you should not have killed. But no matter what, we all feel like there is a high possibility that Kelsey was a Springlock victim, at least when they were alive. We don't know how and we don't know when, but it's a definite possibility. And ultimately, in at number 2, missing children. Much like the Cassidy situation, the entirety of the missing children involved in the missing children's incident may have been Springlock victims. We're still unsure as to the method of extermination that William used on the screaming pests. Sorry, the kids who run around in my building hallways they're still getting to me. If they ever go missing though, these videos are not going to help me. Anyway, we don't know how William dispatched of these kids before shoving them into the suits, and honestly, there may not be a way that he killed them before shoving them in. The act of putting them in the suits may very well have been what killed them, which would make sense given that a Springlock incident would be more agonizing than a simple knife to the chest. And a Springlock collapse would be a more realistic way for the suits to start leaking blood and other fluids, since one knife wound wouldn't really do that, especially around their eyes. Even if the suits didn't like snap closed, if William shoved them into the suits, that's close enough for me. Finally, in at number 1, Crying Child. Okay, now this one is going to be controversial, but there is no way that I could do this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates in my DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram, not asking about my game's Kickstarter, but rather the Bite of 83, and how it had to have been a spring locking bothers me to my core. I say this every time I bring it up. I don't think that this was a spring lock failure. That being said, it's still possible, and that's what this list is about. The reason I don't think it was a spring lock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning no spring locks would have a chance of failing. Since, keep in mind, a spring lock failure refers to the spring lock mechanism failing to stay open, meaning it snaps back into animatronic mode. That's why it's bad if someone is inside, and there would be no spring lock mechanism in and around the mouth because it would always be in animatronic mode, since the jaw just moves up and down. But nevertheless, it's still a possibility, since logic and physics doesn't seem to apply to the FNaF world, which is made evident by those goddamn doors from FNaF 1. Even if they're electromagnet, they would still be open with power, so if they ran out of power, they would end up closing. Just saying.